Mexico. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi, I'm a huge rugby fan, and I'm living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. And as you can see behind me, it's a glorious morning here in my local park this morning, where I'm going to sit and talk to you about all the wonderful international rugby that took place over the weekend. And boy, what a fantastic weekend of rugby it was. So let's get into the weekend recap show right here on Inside Rugby with Mark. Now, if you're a rugby fan around the world, I'm sure you weren't disappointed in the weekend. We had lots going on for everybody to take notice of, and in particular down there in Melbourne, Australia, at the beautiful MCG. And boy, what a spectacle it was, wasn't it, to see that ground with over 90,000 rugby fans packed in to watch the Lions take on the Wallabies in the second test match of this wonderful series in Australia. I don't care what anyone says. Rugby was the winner on Saturday night, and if you read all the comments from my video after the final whistle, you'll know that the split decision is probably 50% of you think that the try should not be allowed from Hugo Keenan because of the Tizano and Jack Morgan incident, and 50% of you said it should have been. I'm not going to get into it anymore here. I thought it was a fantastic game of rugby. The Wallabies are back, I don't care what anybody says, and they're going to cause some problems in the Rugby Championship. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick with it no matter what you say to me in the comments. So there we go. I think Joe Schmidt is doing a wonderful job with this Australian Wallaby team. Now, for some of you that have tuned into other rugby shows around the world, there's a little bit of misinformation out there. Joe Schmidt is not ending his tenure with the Wallabies at the end of this year. He has signed an extension to go through to 2026, and I think at this stage it's going to be around July in 2026 when Joe Schmidt is no longer the head coach of the Australian Wallabies, and he hands over to Les Kiss, who has been appointed as his replacement in the Wallaby head coach position. So Joe Schmidt's not leaving the Wallabies at the end of 2025. He signed an extension to his contract, and he's going to be helping this team through the beginning of 2026, which is great news because I think Joe Schmidt has done a fantastic job with this Wallabies team. And if you haven't checked out my community post on Joe Schmidt's impact on this team since he took over from Eddie Jones as the head coach of the Wallabies, go and check it out. I spent a lot of time putting some statistics together just to show what Joe Schmidt has been actually doing with this team, his win-loss record compared to Eddie Jones, and also some of the other developments that he's done with this team to bring them to where they are now, which was only 45 seconds away from beating the Lions in Melbourne on Saturday night. I'm a huge fan of Joe Schmidt. I think he's an excellent coach. He's a great human being, and he's being able to bring this Wallabies team together, and I think they're going to cause some problems throughout this year's Rugby Championship, and I'm going to make some more videos about that, so stay tuned. So looking back on the game now on Saturday night, after I've had a couple of days to think about it, I think it was a really, really good game of rugby. It was a game of two halves, wasn't it? The Wallabies did really, really well in the first half. I love the way they came out with the intensity that they brought to that game. They showed up front that they were up for the fight, and there's no doubt about it, as many of you have commented in the comments of my previous video, that it was thanks to Rob Valentini and Will Skelton in particular that really stood up for the Wallabies, and they brought that extra strength and height and pace in that forward pack as well. We did see Will Skelton doing a couple of really good run-ups, didn't we, and getting over the gain line for the Wallabies in that game, and it helped them really get on the front foot. So the Wallabies danced out in that first half to a great lead, and we probably thought, well, they're not going to get caught from here, but I always thought the Lions, as you probably did as well, had the ability to come back in that second half, and I think those two tries close to half-time, the one with Dan Sheehan diving over to score a try, and some of you mentioned that in terms of its legality, but on my occasion, or in my perspective, according to the laws, he's allowed to do that when he's scoring a try. And Tom Curry's try in the corner just before half-time, I think that was a really pivotal moment in this game because it gave the British and Irish Lions the momentum going into half-time, didn't it? And in the second half, they could come out and they could believe a bit more in what they were doing, but they still had to finish it off. And I think that's what really gave them the emphasis to win this game, was they were able to go for the full 80 minutes. And I've talked about that in other videos, haven't I, this year, about the Springboks and the All Blacks in particular not going for 80 minutes in their respective games so far this year. And I think the British and Irish Lions just showed that if you're patient, you stick into it, you keep to your game plan, then as they did on Saturday night, even in the last minute of the game, they were able to get over the line and win that game. So if nothing else, it was a great lesson in making sure you keep sticking to your game plan for 80 minutes and making sure you execute the opportunities while they're there. And hats off to the British and Irish Lions for being able to do that, and hats off to all their supporters as well, because it was a fantastic atmosphere by what it looked like at the MCG on Saturday night. And if you listen to anybody on some of the other podcasts who were actually at the game, they all talked about it being one of the most amazing rugby atmospheres they've ever been involved in. So that's fantastic for the game of rugby on a global level, but it's also fantastic for the game of rugby in Australia, as I've talked about many times in other videos. A brilliant event, a brilliant outcome, a brilliant game of rugby, and if nothing else, it's proven, I think, to a lot of people that the Wallabies are back. Go back and watch my videos last year when Joe Schmidt took over the team. I was one of the early adopters and believers that Australian rugby was going to get back and to be able to compete with any team in the world, and here we are in 2025. And I think the Rugby Championship is now set up to be really, really exciting. And watch out for some videos I've got coming up in the next few days talking about the Rugby Championship this year and looking at each of the teams. So there we go, a recap on the British and Irish Lions game, the second test match. We now go to Sydney next weekend to watch the third test match and the final test match in this particular series. No chance for the Wallabies to get back into the series, but they can finish on a high. And I'm sure Joe Schmidt and his team are going to want to do that as they get prepared to go to South Africa to take on the Springboks in the first of their Rugby Championship games. And that's why I think this third game is going to be super important for the Wallabies. They're going to want to show again that they can keep that intensity going for 80 minutes and that they're prepared to take on the World Championships, the World Champions, I should say, over there in South Africa. The Lions, on the other hand, well, they're not going to want to go down without a fight, and they're going to put up all they can to win the series 3-0. There's no doubt about it. And I think Maro Itoje and the rest of the team, after a good celebration, I'm sure this weekend on that series win, are going to pick themselves up again and go again in Sydney on Saturday, because they're going to want to win 3-0 in this particular series. So no matter that it's a dead rubber, I think we're all set for another great game of rugby. Both teams have a certain agenda they want to accomplish, and I'm sure Joe Schmidt's want to prove once again that this Wallabies team is ready to take on the best rugby teams in the world. So keep an eye out for that game on Saturday night in Sydney. I think it's going to be another cracker. I can't wait for it to happen. Analysis once we get into the Rugby Championship, because the Wallabies have got nowhere to hide. They're going to have to play the Springboks in South Africa, which is one of the most difficult things to do, of course, and then they're going to go to Eden Park and play the All Blacks at Eden Park, and that's after the All Blacks have played South Africa at Eden Park. So boy, what a juicy Rugby Championship we have coming up with those two massive games at Eden Park. The Springboks will want to be able to break the record of the Kiwis at Eden Park, and the Wallabies are wanting to go over there and take the Bledisloe Cup off the Kiwis. So there's some really interesting agendas coming together in this year's Rugby Championship competition, and I can't wait for it to start. So just before I stop talking about the Lions versus the Wallabies this weekend, let's go through a couple of players that really stood out for me, and I think they also stood out for you based on the comments I've seen on this game so far. And from the Lions side, without a doubt, Ty Byrne was one of their best players and has been throughout the series and on the tour in general. Tom Curry had another cracker as well, but it was Gibson Park and Russell for me also who were managing the game around the ground expertly for the Lions, and I think that went a long way to helping them get across the finish line in this particular game. So there were some standout players there. I thought Aki did make a difference by starting this game. He was able to get up over that gain line for the Lions and create good second phase ball, and I think that did have an impact, particularly in the second half, as the Wallaby defence was getting either a little bit tired or a little bit lazy in terms of standing off the British and Irish Lions as they came up. And I think that's one of the things that Joe Schmidt will be looking at in the debrief of this game. Bit of sad news for Harry Potter on the Australian side, going off with a hamstring injury. Never good to see a player leave the field in an international match like this, let alone against the Lions, where you only have an opportunity every 12 years. He looked really upset as he left the field. You've got to feel sorry for the guy. It was a big moment in his career. If you know anything about Harry Potter's history as a rugby player for the Wallabies, he's just been very, very unlucky when it comes to injuries. and let's hope that's not something that keeps going throughout his career. Let's hope he bounces back and that he's going to be good to go in the Rugby Championship. I hope so, and that's the case. But I was also surprised with the ability of Tate McDermott when he came on. Played on the wing for the Wallabies. Wasn't he pretty good? And I tell you what, I've been really impressed with Len Ekitau and Joseph Sua'ali in the 12 and 13. I think some of you have been overly critical on Sua'ali in the 13. I think those two are going to become one of the best midfield combinations in World Rugby as we lead up to the Rugby World Cup in 2027 in Australia. So keep your eye on Ekitau and Sua'ali and their combination. They've played, what, 6 or 7 games together now. They're only going to get better and better in defence and in attack. And I think we're going to see some more brilliant breaks from those two in the games throughout the Rugby Championship. Really impressed with Tom Wright at fullback. I have been ever since I've watched him play in a Wallabies jersey. He's getting better and better, not scared to counter-attack from inside his own half, bring the ball back up for Australia. And I tell you what Tom Wright's really good at doing. He's really good at making decisions on the fly, whether or not to kick the ball. We saw this a couple of times throughout this game on Saturday night. He was deep inside his own half. On one occasion he decided to make a kick. He nearly got a 50-22. That was a really good decision on that occasion. And then the next time he decided to run the ball and get the Australians back into an attacking position. And again, that worked out to be a very, very good decision. So Tom Wright, in my opinion, is really growing in stature as a fullback in the Australian team. And I think he's going to be one of the dangerous players that we can keep an eye on throughout the Rugby Championship. But what I like what Joe Schmidt's done with this team is he's changed the team around quite a bit. We've seen some experiments with De Crepney coming in. I think he played well in the first test and had a really, really good game. But with the likes of Valentini coming in, this is starting to show now that the Wallabies are getting a bit of depth in their squad. And I think this is going to be important when you've got guys like Angus Bell that you can come off the bench, and Pollard and Robertson, although I think Robertson did a couple of things on defence late in that game that were questionable for the Wallabies. But if you don't give them the experience of playing in this big games, how are they ever going to progress in their career? So I think Joe Schmidt's doing the right thing by giving these Wallaby guys the opportunities in these big games. And when they get into this Rugby Championship now, they're going to learn from those experiences, and I think they're going to be better for it. So I think the Wallabies are starting to get good depth. Joe Schmidt went for a 6-2 combination in the weekend. He's got to work out whether that's going to be good enough. It's going to be interesting to see what he does against the Springboks. But at least we can now start saying that Australia's got players that can come off the bench and make a difference in the game. We saw that with Ben Donaldson in the first test match. I thought when he came on in the second half, there was a difference to the way that the Australians were playing, and it ignited that comeback that they had in the second half in that first test match. So there we go. I think lots of positive for both teams to take out from this. I think the Wallabies are going to be up for it on Saturday night, so make sure you check it out and see how that last game goes in the third test match in Sydney. Okay, now let's get on and talk about the World Cup qualifiers that were played over the weekend. Some very interesting games and a few things to talk about in this section of the show as well. Okay, so the first World Cup qualifier game this weekend was between the United Arab Emirates and Namibia. This was played in Namibia, and what a game it was. Huge score in this game, and I'm laughing because it was like a cricket score more than anything else. And Namibia ended up winning this game by 86 points to 29. Yes, you heard me correctly. And I'm sure Mr. Coetzee is not very happy with the Namibia defensive line because they did let in 29 points in this game. He made reference to it in the interview afterwards and said they need to improve next time out, and more importantly he said that they can, but they did score 86 points. But how good is this United Arab Emirates team? Well, we've seen Namibia being beaten by 50 and 60 points by other teams in the past, haven't we? So maybe we shouldn't read too much into it. But congratulations to everybody associated with the Namibia rugby team. Well done. It's another good win and another step closer to Rugby World Cup in 2027 in Australia. So next up was Chile versus Brazil, probably more renowned for their abilities as football nations, but in this case their rugby's getting better and better, particularly Chile. We've seen them play some good games in the past. Well, I have anyway. I don't know whether you've checked them out, but they have played well, and I've been impressed with their slow but gradual progression up the ranks of the World Rugby rankings. They took on Brazil this weekend and they had a good win by 35 points to 20. Again, their defensive line was not too good on a couple of occasions. That's something they'll need to look at if they are to progress further in this competition. So Chile and Brazil are in the South America #1 division. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But it was a good win for Chile, and now they will go through to the final of that South America 1 division to play off to see who goes to the Rugby World Cup. So a good win to Chile. Congratulations to all of their supporters and fans across the world, and let's hope for their sake that they get to the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027. Now the last game I was really interested in, it was played in Ascension. It was between Paraguay and Uruguay, the Los Teros from Uruguay, and Los Teros had a very good win in this game. They won by 38 points to 0. In my preview show on Friday, I talked about them having a strong team and playing very well. Well, they didn't disappoint in this game. So one of the things that stood out for me in this game was the play by their loose forward, Santiago Savita. He scored 3 tries as a loose forward in this game. He's an absolutely brilliant player. If you get to watch any of the highlights of this game, or if you get to watch the whole game, check him out. He's very, very good. He's one of the best flankers in world rugby at the moment, without a doubt. And it's going to be interesting to see how he goes against some of the bigger teams. If Uruguay gets an opportunity to play against some of the bigger teams, I'd love to see how he goes. But a wonderful performance in this game from Santiago Savita, scoring 3 tries against Paraguay. And Uruguay ended up winning this game by 38 points to 0. Fantastic work. They didn't let Paraguay in for any points in this game, so their discipline was really good, their defense was really good, and they ended up putting a good number of points on the board as well. Now these two teams will meet once more, next time in Montevideo in Uruguay, the capital of Uruguay, and this will determine then who will go through to play Chile in that South America 1 division final to go to the Rugby World Cup. So a couple of more games for Uruguay if they're going to make it to the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027. But I'm tipping my hat to the Uruguayans. I think they're going to do it. I think they've got a brilliant rugby team down there, and they're going to get better and better. So keep your eye on them. They're ranked number 17 in the world at the moment, and I suspect they're going to go up in the rankings quite significantly. So there you go. Those were the 3 World Cup qualifiers that were played in the weekend. As I say, a couple more steps for a couple of those teams to see whether they are actually going to be on a plane to Australia in 2027. But to all the fans that supported those teams in the weekend, well done. It was some really good rugby played, and 86 points to Namibia. You can never complain about that one, can you? Okay, time to have a look at some women's international rugby games that were played over the weekend. So let's get into that now. Okay, so first up in the weekend was Italy ladies against the Scottish ladies, and Italy came out on top here. A little bit of a surprise. I thought the Scottish girls were going to beat them in this one, but Italy came through in the end. Close though, there was 1 try in it, 34-29 in favour of Italy. Well done to all the Italian ladies and fans of that team. That was a very good game of rugby, very entertaining to watch, and a good win there to Italy in the end. So next up was Australia against Wales, and a bit of an upset here. Wales 21, Australia 12. I wasn't picking that one. I thought the ladies from Australia were going to be able to pick themselves up after a couple of losses against the Kiwi Black Ferns, but they haven't done that. And the Welsh team have done something their men haven't been able to do on a regular basis lately, and that's win a game of international rugby. So well done to the Welsh ladies. A good win there in Australia against Australia, and they'll be getting pretty pumped up now as we get ready for the Women's Rugby World Cup. That's coming up very soon. Next women's game that was on the cards was the one in Japan, between Japan and Spain. I thought Spain were going to get a little bit closer in this game, but the home team did what they needed to do and played very quick rugby. They're a bit like their men, so they like to play at speed, the Japanese ladies, and that's what they did in this game. They got over the top of the Spanish team by 30 points to 19. It was a solid win for them, and they want to build on this as they go forward as well. A very good halfback they've got there in Japan, and she's really dynamic, getting around the base of scrums and breakdowns as well. So it'd be interesting to see how her future career goes. But a good win to the Japanese ladies. Well done to everybody supporting that team. And then the last women's international game this weekend was between the 2 old rivals, the Kiwis and the South Africans, and it was the Black Ferns 15 playing against the South African national team. It was a humdinger of a game, went down to the last few minutes, and the Kiwi girls ended up winning by 34 points to 26. So a good win to the Black Ferns 15. Of course, the Black Ferns World Cup squad was just named a couple of days ago. They'll be getting ready now for the Rugby World Cup. That's coming up soon, and there'll be a lot of expectations on the Kiwis, who are currently ranked number 3 in the world. But a good win against the South Africans there. The South Africans have got some big ladies in that team, and they really shone through this weekend. And it was a better performance, I thought, from the South African ladies, particularly against this Kiwi team. So I think they've got a chance to keep building on that, and it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do in the Rugby World Cup. So played in a great spirit this game, a lot of intensity between South Africa and New Zealand, always on a rugby field, and it doesn't matter whether it's the men's or the ladies, the same level intensity comes out, and it was a very, very good competition of rugby between those two teams. So there we go, that's the ladies internationals that took place over the weekend. Some really good rugby games. If you're not following a lot of the women's internationals, check them out, because they are worth watching and they've got a lot of entertainment, and there's a lot of skill in these games from a lot of these players as well, which I was really delighted in watching over the weekend in these games that I did watch. So there we go, it was a bumper weekend of international rugby across the world, with the Lions winning the second test match and therefore taking the series against the Wallabies at Melbourne in Australia. A fantastic crowd of over 90,000 people packed into the MCG cricket ground in that beautiful city of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia, to watch that game. And there's no doubt about it that rugby is on the up again, thanks to Joe Schmidt and the Wallabies putting on performances like that. Some really good Rugby World Cup qualifier games over the weekend. Congratulations again to all those teams, and good luck to all the women that are playing in this year's Rugby World Cup. I'll be following some of those games right here on my channel. So if you're a fan of rugby, it doesn't matter whether it's women or men, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Remember, my goal is to go to the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027, take you along with me on this channel and do a lot of work from down there. So by subscribing to the channel, liking my videos and supporting me in any way you can, that'll help me get to Australia in 2027. And I send forward already my gratitude and thanks to you all for helping me on that journey. Okay folks, that's it for the recap show here on Monday at Inside Rugby with Mark. I'll be back again soon throughout the week with lots more content. We're going to be looking at the Rugby Championship more in detail this week. We've got the midweek show coming up on Wednesday as well, where I'll talk a lot about some other specific things, world of rugby, and there'll be plenty of other things that we can talk about in between those shows as well. So make sure you stick around and support me here, and I'll see you again very soon from my beautiful park here in Cancun in Mexico. Until next time, keep safe, keep well, keep enjoying your rugby across the world, and I'll see you again really soon. Until then, adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Bye for now.